Product provided by Nintendo.
へいらっしゃい何名様ですか寿司神スタイル侍間違いない目の前に溢れ出す光の霊ドレミタダダダダお皿の上で踊って回ってピカピカ光り輝いてどうやって昇進
Nintendo has had some pretty quirky and crazy digital-only games come out in the last few years. Not commonly known as Nintendo games, we've gotten Pushmo and Dylan's Rollin' Western as two examples of digital-only Nintendo games that feature some wacky and different characters than we're used to, but they still shine with a charm of their own. Sushi Striker's The Way of Sushido follows a similar path, though not a digital-only game. It's a new Nintendo IP with quite possibly one of the most bizarre yet hilarious narrative premises I've played this year. Sushi Striker The Way of Sushido is available now on the Nintendo 3DS and Switch for $40 on 3DS and $50 on the Switch. Traditionally, Nintendo hasn't had the most narrative-driven games out there. Super Mario Odyssey and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had a story behind them, but their stories weren't really the star of those games, rather just the background info to an amazing experience. Ironically, the more under-the-radar IP Sushi Strikers changes all that with a very wacky but completely funny story. You play as Musashi in this world that's been taken over by an empire. The empire has complete control over the world's sushi and has outlawed it from being eaten or even spoken of. This has left people like Musashi in his village hungry, starving for anything just to eat and survive. In the Great War prior to the rise of the Empire, Musashi's parents gave their lives to fight for sushi and thus left young Musashi with a hatred for sushi. It is basically the reason why his parents aren't here anymore. This all changes when Musashi's life is turned upside down by the wonders of the Sushi Strikers. Sushi Strikers The Way of Sushido offers some of the most comical and witty writing I've seen in games this year. It almost felt like a cheesy Saturday morning cartoon. Character dialogue is through text and the occasional voice clip featuring some bizarre and weird villains like a muscular man and a Tomura Shigaraki looking like villain. Although I would have loved to see the text between the characters be fully voiced, I think the fully animated cutscenes complete with voice acting more than makes up for it. While Sushi Strikers The Way of Sushido proved to be a completely competent and fun action puzzle RPG all on its own with its gameplay, the entertaining and fun characters were definitely the icing on this cake, or rather the seaweed flakes on the rice? Pick your metaphor. Though it's primarily a puzzle game, you'll find elements from RPGs to action combat in this sushi-themed puzzler. Sushi Strikers throws you onto a new Super Mario Bros.-like world map that has you battling soldiers of the Empire at every stage. Every stage also has 3 objectives or goals for you to complete, like achievements that go towards earning a better rank on a level. At first glance, things may even be a bit complicated, but in practice, I found it to be pretty easy to grasp. At the center of the stage are conveyor belts of sushi split between the 2 players, with the center being shared by both players. Throughout the gameplay, you're tasked with stacking up plates of the same color that rack up right in front of you in piles. You can either do this with physical controls or the touchscreen if you're playing in portable mode. I preferred the physical controls, though my roommates seemed to prefer the touchscreen controls. Anyway, these piles can then be thrown at the opponent, making their health gauge at the top right go down. The whole concept is you stacking up your plates and earning higher piles for stronger attacks against your opponent. That also means constant management of knowing when to call it quits on the stack, because more often than not, the difference in the win could be a single attack. That's the core mechanics, but of course, being an action RPG on top of it all, there's way more smaller bits to it. These more increment changes in stat elements are what push this puzzler from being just a basic match 3-of-a-kind puzzle-like game to something deeper in combat for me. When stacking plates, you're only given 7 seconds to stack. Anything longer and your stacks are dropped. Additionally, if the plate you're hovering over goes away on the conveyor belt, your stack ends by force. When you do see a stack, you'll see a multiplier for the attack, making higher stacks more powerful. The color of the plates and the sushi also matters. For example, certain plates offer higher quality sushi that not only do more damage but also have different effects. You see, each sushi has a sort of quality to it that gets activated if you either stack a bunch of it at once or if it's set as your character's favorite sushi. Outside of the sushi, you'll also get these Pokemon-like creatures called sushi sprites. These little sushi god-like creatures each offer a special skill that can be used in battle. You can have up to 3 of these equipped at once during a battle. They'll appear on the left side of your screen with their skill gauges slowly filling up with every pile of plates you make. When one of your sprites have a filled up gauge, you can activate their skill to help you out in battle. These powers vary in effect, like the Sushi Bonanza that turns all the plates on screen into a single color for a quick stack, or the Sushi Shield that reduces damage taken for about 9 seconds. These sprites have a leveling system, as do you. The main difference is that at certain levels these sprites can also have an awakening, an evolution to a new form that can vastly change their effect and power. On top of that, you can use items to change up the stats of your sprites outside of battle. Now that's most of the single player content, but outside of that, you can play against another player in the arena mode. This is unlocked early on in the campaign mode along with the online component later on in the game. Arena mode lets you compete against other players either locally, either on one system or with two. Though it is completely playable with one system, I prefer to play with two or just online. The single system option forces you to share the traditional view of the gameplay on a single screen, so it may be a bit difficult for some to adjust to the gameplay. Especially if you're playing in tabletop mode, it's just way too tiny. I found the other ways of playing multiplayer much better and much more fun to play too. Sushi Strikers looks like a cross between a Saturday morning cartoon on 4Kids and an anime, although I guess that can technically be the same thing. Either way, it has a sense of charm and great presentation. Characters are expressive in dialogue with quirky over-the-top reactions. Normally that'd be a bit corny, but in a world where there was literally a war for sushi, it really just seems to fit in place. Cutscenes are beautifully well animated and immediately set the bar high for this game's visuals, with a opening anime cinematic prior to the start screen. There are some improvements that can be made though. I thought that some of the designs for the sushi sprites looked a bit cheap, almost like knockoff Pokemon designs you'd find in an iOS or Android knockoff game. They didn't feel as memorable in terms of iconic creatures. Some of the environment was rather plain looking too, specifically when characters would be in a conversation. I really loved the character art for these moments, but the backgrounds always seemed rather bland or plain. I thought it could at least be freshened up a bit more with maybe some more animation, or an art style that matched the characters rather than just plain 3D models. Playing between both the dock and portable mode on the Switch, I didn't really notice any performance issues. Sushi Strikers looked great whether I was playing on the big screen TV or on the Switch's small display. The only time the smaller display did become an issue was if I decided to play local split screen in tabletop mode, making it a bit difficult to see.
Jinrai?
Did the Imperial Army get him? I've gotta go help him! But how? And what is this? And why did Franklin give it to me? The more I think about it, the hungrier I get.
The music for Sushi Strikers is rock on awesome. In combat you'll hear some great guitar riffs as you rack up the plates in front of you. The songs are catchy and fast paced, matching the adrenaline that is constantly found in those last minute wins where a single hit can decide the winner or the loser of a match. In the world view you'll be greeted to more calm and happy tunes, admittedly not as memorable but still alright. Definitely the shining piece of the audio work though are the voice actors and the iconic opening theme song to this game. Like I mentioned in the visual section of this review, the awesome opening just doesn't look great, it sounds great too. It features a full-on Japanese pop rock song that sounds like it belonged in a more edgy version of Splatoon. It's so darn catchy. Voice acting is also really well done, though that ended up being a bad thing and a good thing. The voice acting really sold me on the personalities of characters, even making some of these villains feel like modern Earthbound grunts. The problem is that they only fully speak in cutscenes. It made me wish that the text conversations were fully voiced too. Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido is an excellent puzzle game that takes a simple concept while adding in an incredible amount of strategy and depth to it. The campaign alone can take you about 10 hours to complete, maybe 17 hours if you try to complete each of the 3 objectives for a level. Outside of the main campaign, a lot of the replay value lies in playing with friends either locally on one system or wirelessly with 2. You can also hop online to play with randoms online, something I preferred so I don't have to deal with the whole weird split screen view. Ultimately, Sushi Strikers proved to be much more than a simple stack up the same color type puzzle game than it looked like at first glance. It's more complex and thus more entertaining than it appeared to be. With all that said, unless you're a completionist or someone that prides themselves in competitive puzzle games, there may not be enough content for some gamers with the starting price of $50 on the Switch and $40 on the 3DS. If you are that type of gamer, I think this game is completely worth checking out at launch. I personally felt satisfied with the content mostly because it wasn't as straightforward as videos let it out to be, The complexity of the combat and management system made it much more entertaining and fun to play. That does it for my review of Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido for the Nintendo Switch, and it is also available on the 3DS. If you have any questions about the game or games you'd like me to review that are coming out in the future, let me know in the comments down below. You can also hit me up on Twitter or Instagram for a much faster response. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing for more content just like this. I'll also be at E3 next week thanks to Nintendo, and I'll be covering a bunch of their games including Super Smash Bros., so stay tuned for that. Until then, you can keep up to date with me on my social network links and my Discord in the link in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.